Hello, Divya. It is so great to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on, Karen. It's exciting to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me. I'm psyched for today because you and I have chatted before about confidence, and it's such an important topic for the listeners in my community. Um, and although so many of my listeners are yoga teachers, I know I most likely have a smattering of other people who don't teach yoga. But the one thing that it almost seems to be a common human experience is wanting to feel more confident in all aspects of your life. So I know in our pre-show conversations, we've talked about that as something we'll tackle today. And I'd love to ask you some questions about that as I've prepared. I thought of sort of an interesting way to kick it off. I was going to kick it off with sort of my general question of tell me a little bit about yourself. I want to do that second because in doing some pre-work before the show and watching your TED Talk and watching you on some other shows, some other podcasts, I could really tell that you feel, at least my perception of you, is that you feel really confident. And so I'd love to know, number one, is that true? And number two, where does that come from in you?
Great question. So, yes, that is true. And the way I see it is that confidence, a lot of people kind of talk about. Actually, I was talking to one of my clients today that she said, "Oh, yeah, I'm confident." I'm like, "Okay, I see that you're telling me you're confident. And at the same time, you're telling me on your intake form that you need to work on this. So to me, the confidence is there are different areas for confidence. Some could be that, for example, I love public speaking, put me in a room with, just did a workshop with 100 people, didn't know anybody, people didn't know. They sat down, they started sharing personal problems. So I can create that magic. Now, take another area, even today. Like if I'm talking to you, I'm a people person. Then yes, I'll go, I get my energy from the other person. Now you put me in front of the camera, that Zoom, right? That Logitech. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And now I gotta do the Facebook Live. So I'll do it, but I'm not confident in it. Confident in the sense like, like you just show up and you are in the flow. So to me, confidence is so different and it has got so many different variations of the definition and it's so unique to each person. And the way I say it is like, you can be confident in one area, but may not be that confident in other areas. So it's
Mm,
important to recognize what are your strengths, what are your zone of genius, and just kind of go with that.
mm. Yeah, that's such a great example because a lot of the women I work with in the context of teaching yoga and wanting to feel confident doing that, they're just sort of at a loss because they feel confident in other areas of their life. But when they begin teaching classes and walk in the room, they feel really nervous and stressed. And on some level, especially if they have raised a family and or they have a corporate job and they do presentations in their job, they're wondering, why can't I access that to the same degree as when I am doing these other things and I feel confident? So what are some things, like, even for yourself, how do you lean into the discomfort if you were doing camera work type things? Is there something that you draw on from the other things you do where you actually do feel confidence is at a high level?
So I have like, a lot of different toolkits and tools in my toolkit and backpack, so to speak. So it depends. I say like, the top of the triangle lies or sits self-awareness and emotional intelligence. The key is like being self-aware. Where are your blind spots? And I've got plenty of blind spots. And if you're thinking that people don't have blind spots, I am sorry. Like, hey, power to you. Maybe you're from Mars or Venus or some other place. But I haven't encountered one person who is just perfect in everything. And maybe there are. So if you are, kudos to you, power to you. So I become like, as I mentioned about like self-awareness. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? And it's important to know your weaknesses and shortcomings or the blind spots. And once you know that, then using emotional intelligence, which tool works in that situation, because what may work for one person may not work for another. So I'll kind of give an example for myself that I'm talking about doing the Facebook Live. So then what I do is I use the technique when I do my book writing, that when I'm writing my books, I have this picture of one of my clients. So of course she doesn't know that. And so having a picture, so I'm writing, I'm speaking to that one person. So when
Mm.
I do that, I'm in the flow, I'm writing, it just goes. So similarly, when I'm doing my Facebook Live or something like that, I'll imagine that she's sitting right there, just like you're sitting in front of me. And brain doesn't know the difference between the reality and the visualization. That's why we always say, right, that visualization is very powerful. So I visualize sitting. So that's just one tool. And that, what it does is that helps me lean into discomfort that, yeah, somebody's there, What if only one person saw my video? So the key is like shifting the focus from me to the person you're serving.
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting that you're sharing that because sometimes, I mean, I can really connect to that technique. And one of the ways I describe it is taking the selfie mode off and turning it to landscape. And I use that with yoga teachers. If you feel really nervous when you walk in the room, shift to that perspective of instead of having all the focus of yourself on you and how you're feeling, shift the lens and teach to the one person in front of you, maybe even not looking so much at everybody else. And slowly but surely, you'll start to feel your feet under you and feel a little more present and calm. So that was interesting
Yeah.
that you
And
went there.
just to kind of add to that very quickly, like, I keep also the notes from my clients or what they have said. So I've got a notebook of my impact. I call it my impact notebook. And I could pick it up and read it. And then that helps me to lean into discomfort because what I'm doing is not for me, it's for others. And when we shift, I always say that flip the M and me, it becomes W. So, like, when we flip that me to we, what happens is that your focus is like, oh, nobody cares. People are so bogged down in their own problems. They don't care what you're looking. And if they do, so what? You're not here to please everyone. So think about like, from a yoga teacher perspective, that one person, they may have a cringe in the back, they may have something, or they've been having a hard week, they could be going through some personal conflict, family conflict, health. I mean, there's so many things. What if your teaching could make a difference in their lives?
Mm. Yeah, very
What
true.
if you could create that space for them?
Hmm. Yeah, so now your focus is less on you and more on them. Yeah, that
It's
can be.
about the impact at the end of the day.
I love that idea of what did you call it? An impact notebook?
Yeah.
That is fabulous. I love that. So now that you've shared a little bit about, we were talking about confidence and you mentioned your clients, share a little bit about what you do. Like what is what you do and tell us a little bit about the details there.
Sure. So I dance in multiple areas, and people say, oh, how can one person do so many things? And here's what I'll say is that I love learning and I love expanding. I love pushing into the zones of discomfort. And that doesn't mean I don't have discomfort. I've got discomfort throughout the day. And the beauty of that is that when you recognize that you're a human being and there's always room for growth, it allows you to become familiar with failure. So I will say that it's so important to become familiar and comfortable with failure. So what I do is like I've got three arms to my business and I've got a fabulous team. That's how I'm able to do a lot of things. So one is the whole around confident leaders, like, we build confident leaders. It's not only for coaches, there are a lot of coaches, but we also like work with confident people to become confident. And as I said, there's so many nuances to it. It's not just like one color, like, okay, I like red. No, confidence is a spectrum of all the colors on, and then the whole thing that becomes white, and then that becomes the confidence. So that's one area that I work on. Then the second is I help a lot of entrepreneurs and professionals 10x, 100x the productivity through artificial intelligence. I think so. I'll just kind of stay with two.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, AI certainly is on everybody's mind right now. So I would
Mhm.
imagine that must be like a huge area. When you mentioned in some of what we were chatting about before, clients, are these people that you're working with one-on-one?
Yes, I work with people one-on-one as well as I work with in cohorts.
Got it. Okay. One of the things that you just mentioned that sparked my interest, there's actually two things. I just took some notes, but this first one, when you were saying you love learning and you love being in that zone of discomfort, and it reminded me of a conversation I had yesterday when I was running one of my training programs. And one of the teachers was talking about one of the techniques that I was teaching and some of the struggle she was having shifting from where she is now using this new technique in her classes and wanting to be in this sort of different state using this technique. And I was thinking when you were calling it a zone of discomfort, is that oftentimes what people experience when they're trying to shift from one way of being to another? And how can people manage that feeling of discomfort when they're learning something new?
Great question, Karen. So one of the things to realize is that our brains are designed to suffice, not optimize. I come from a neuro background and biochemistry background, so done a lot of studies in there. So the first, if you kind of sit and recognize that, my brain just loves to automate. So then that takes the pressure off you that you're not able to do things. All right. So brain doesn't want to do it. How can I coax it? How can I help it become familiar with failure? And so now what you're doing is you're playing a game versus like focus, I cannot do this. I need to do this. So I call it the should syndrome. I don't know if there's a thing like that or not, but recognizing that I should be doing this, I should be done. It's all right. So flip the should versus, replace the should with could. So when we talk about zone of discomfort, so as I mentioned, that brain does not like to optimize and brain doesn't like pain. So because it doesn't like pain, what it does is that voice, your inner critic is going to tell you, you know why? If you do that, what if you fail? What if you're not the right person? What if people mock you? Who are you? Kind of step in the room and teach yoga. You just had one certification. There are people with years and years of experience. So that inner critic is trying to hold you back in the zone of comfort. Even though it is self-sabotaging, why does it do that? Because that's all it knows. So now, slowly but gently, think about your brain as like a little child. You wouldn't shout at it. Think about like those parents, the child falls down so many times and they take the first step and like, yay! The whole room is filled with joy. So, what if you were to give yourself that grace and say, like, all right, I'm experiencing that zone of discomfort. Give it a name, have fun with it. So, now what do I do next? So let me reframe. Instead of I should, what if I could?
Mm. Yeah.
So that has a lot of power. What
Mhm.
if I could just take one step, just do this one class? Because there's so much power in the present moment.
Mm.
Let me just do this. And then I can also incorporate, like, before the end of the class, what's one thing that you loved about today? What's one thing you would want me to do more of? So getting like real-time feedback right there.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the difference between should and could in my hearing it is so different. I mean, should is heavy and could is light. And there's so many things which are baked into the yoga teacher training process that are covered in this. You have to do it this way, you should do it this way, this sort of binary, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. So I know people listening will relate to that feeling of I'm going into my class and I don't feel empowered to be myself. I'm bringing in this backpack of all these things I should be doing. And so I really like that you offered this, as you say, this reframe to, I mean, even when people say, I have to go teach class tonight at 6, it's like, well, what about I get to go teach class at 6?
Yeah, or if you could say like, oh, I get to teach, like, I get to teach and like, what if I could impact one person?
Yeah.
Take that could even further because you're teaching yoga class because you want to create an impact. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in there. You would just learn yoga and do it for yourself. So you're there for impact. So take it one step further as you continue to become familiar with that zone of discomfort.
Mhm. That's fabulous. So one of the other things you said that I really would love to hear you speak on a little bit more is the concept of emotional intelligence. I sort of feel like that's become a bit of a buzzword over recent times. And, with social media, sometimes these buzzwords get extra amplification because people start to use them. I don't know that if I actually had to define it, I'm not actually sure what I would say, quite honestly. So give us a sense of what is emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence, I mean, I could do emotional intelligence 101. I do workshops for like 5 days on it. For our short purposes here, given the time constraint we have, I would say is emotions, right? And the intelligence to deal with your emotions, the intelligence to regulate your emotions. So, what if we could define it in one sentence? The difference between the reaction and response. Simple for layman's term. Something happens, boom, we react. And that's okay. I mean, sometimes, it just happens. But next time you feel the urge, take a pause. And don't forget that you do have a choice.
Mm,
And there's a choice, so like you'll still react and it's okay. And it depends on the scale of reaction. Sometimes those are okay, but sometimes they're not okay. So just kind of working on it.
mhm,
It's a process. Our brains are conditioned, by the time you're 35, 95% of your thoughts and behaviors already automated.
mhm,
So I don't know about you, like, as we age, a lot of my behaviors are still automated. And it's just kind of becoming self-aware, taking a pause. The way I see it is just like a highway. They do the construction. The road is done fantastic. Not even a week goes by and you see the construction workers again over there. So we are all work in progress till the last day of our lives. That's how I see it.
yeah. So as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking, I mean, sometimes, I hear things and I try to sort of translate it into the context of what's the lesson there for somebody teaching yoga. Although these things are universal, what we're talking about is universal to human experience. I'm thinking, though, in particular, when you were talking about pausing and giving yourself a chance to step away from that conditioned response to something more intelligent, right? Which is more mindful in whatever way that looks like for that situation. However, some of the teachers I work with have some sort of history, and I'm going to use the word trauma somewhat lightly here because I'm not talking about big T trauma. I'm talking about I walk in the room to teach my class and I'm reminded of such and such a situation, not a super traumatic situation, but something where I felt uncomfortable. And so I'm holding myself out here in this room as the expert to teach yoga, but I'm reminded of this other situation. And so I'm curious now that we're thinking about emotional intelligence, if I have that reaction to, in this situation, get really nervous. And it's triggered by either my conscious or unconscious acknowledgement of this past situation that's the cause of my reaction. Do I have to go back and sort of excavate that situation and start to link it to my behavior that I want to change? Or can I just stay at the level of the surface and try to change the behavior there?
Usually you have to work through the emotions and heal it, because you can stay on surface and you'll be able to kind of go through the situation, but it will keep on coming back till
Yeah.
you have dealt with it and released it and let it go. And
Yeah.
then also it will keep on coming back because the hippocampus, like, we have a whole memory bank. So it is stored in the brain. So think of it like this, that let's say if you're used to getting out of your car and you're used to taking a road, but now there is construction, you don't want to go because, there could be a detour, there could be like lot delays on that, but sometimes you don't even think and you take the road. So then the acceptance kind of comes into play. So there are multi layers to it. It's not as simple as like, what step one, two, three. And it would also depend on each person. Like, the situation is unique to different people. And also recognizing that for some people have breakthroughs really quickly. For some, it can take years and everything is fine. There's no defined
Mm.
success criteria for that.
Yeah. I know when I work with teachers one on one, sometimes in our conversations, they'll be at the surface level of what's not working for them. And as I start asking questions, they start realizing there's a connection between
Mhm.
what's not working out for them in the here and now. And, oh, I'm having this memory now that I'm talking to you about something that I experienced as a child. And I'm starting to think that there's a connection there. So this leads me to my question around sort of the unconscious things that are happening and sort of the conscious ways we're behaving. And especially because you have a neuro background, a neuroscience background, I'm curious, how do we bring those things to the surface? Is it really only possible when we talk to somebody else who's not in our own head?
Well, it is yes and no. So the first key is like self-awareness. That when do you feel triggered? Like, because you'll know it.
Mm.
Human beings are extremely intelligent creatures, as well as very complex and complicated. So recognizing it and figuring out what is bothering you the most. Because like some quirks. So for example, like, I like to take a break when I'm eating. Just kind of take that 10-15 minutes. So just few years back, I would be having lunch, turn on the TV, like, you want to take a break. So like, okay, you feel that turning on TV is a good way, you're numbing your brain or playing games or, whatever it is. But now I'm trying to bring as much mindfulness in my life throughout the day as much as possible. So doing conscious living. And some days I will not even know, and I'll be in TV room eating. So then I realized, and then like, becoming aware. And
Mm.
then when you're aware, then you have to make a deliberate choice. So
Mm.
mindfulness is not easy and it can be tiring. So that's where I always say that is that pick one thing to work on.
Mhm.
So let's say you want to work on one thing. So I'm just talking about myself again, mindful eating. So this way, sometimes I'll even just be in the moment. Like for example, today I had salad, arugula salad with some green dressing. I had some pomegranate, blueberries, and some nuts. So it was a delicious, some apple, some very delicious. And then I started playing game with it that, okay, let me see how those two flavors match. Like, you're picking in the fork. I'm not like deliberately going and picking. Two popped up. I'm like, huh. It's interesting. Apple and pomegranate taste really good. So It is about like knowing yourself, going back to emotional intelligence, like, what makes you enjoy things, what things stick for you, what works for you, and then just kind of building upon it slowly but surely. There are no shortcuts. And
Mm,
then the key is that you can do that yourself, or you can be part. I have found, I mean, to this day, like I'll share that, like in my first coaching class, like I think so 2008, I forget the year, I was like doing between 2008 2009. One of my first coaches, Angela, like such a powerful coach, she said that just because you get certified as a coach will not mean that you don't need directions. We all have blind spots till the last day of our lives. So to this day, I've got two coaches for myself. So it's completely on your own. You can do it on your own. Or if you work with a professional, then of course the path to success gets much shorter because they've made the mistakes, they've seen, they've had the experience. So I always say that there is no right or wrong path, whatever works for you.
yeah. Yeah, I can say too, when I've worked with a coach, it's been so helpful. And I remember over the years, as I've worked with different coaches, they've observed things about me that I didn't see. And in bringing it up, even in one case, I got initially sort of defensive, like, oh, that's not me. And then the more we talked about it, the more I realized the connection to something in my past, and it started to make sense. And that was so necessary to move forward. So I totally agree with that. Um, One of the things when I was taking a look at your TED Talk, the concept of sort of having it all. And I know that this was something that you had spoken on in that talk. And one of the things that sometimes the women I work with find challenging is if they do have this passion for teaching yoga, and if they're also raising a family and also working a full-time job, there is sort of on some level just running out of time, that feeling like I don't have enough time to get all these things done. And at the same time, wanting to really invest in teaching yoga because they're passionate about it, even if they are passionate about their job. It's sort of, you can have multiple things that you're really fired up about. So the concept of having it all, I think another thing out there that people say, how do we actually do that? What comes up for you as you think about that concept? And certainly as I watch some of the talk, I could see that you were speaking on.
Or so I say, like, as I talk about it in the TED Talk, there are some ingredients, basic ingredients that you need to have. Without those, it's not going to work. But the key is defining, I compare it to baking your own cake.
Mm,
So, what's your cake going to be?
mm,
It's okay. You have a family, you have a full-time job, you want to do yoga, but what does that success look like? Define it. So, I'll give an example for one of my clients. She came to me very ambitious, wanted to live her life to the fullest, and yet she was very unhappy and felt unfulfilled, even though she had everything check, check, check on the box, but she felt empty and unfulfilled. So we sat down and we figured out what was it that she really wanted. And she said that the corporation job was very demanding. So she wanted a job, but she didn't want to climb up the ladder, just a paycheck for benefits and all that. So then out of that, the action came out, find a job where it's only like a checkbox, where she will, of course, show up fully. She would not like, very conscientious, very nice person, but where she would know the work is okay, like, she would just be okay with that. She's still finding some joy in it. So we said that. Then for her family, she was very worried that, oh, I don't get me time. I'm like, what's me time? These children will grow up. By the time they're 10, 12, they'll not want to hang out. And then you'll be craving that time. So, what if spending the time with children was your me time?
Mm.
Because think about how much you're learning, that fun you're having. Why does it have to be separate? Like all these definitions that society has literally,
Mm.
thrust upon us. And she's like, yeah, why couldn't I put my daughter, get a runner stroller, and go for a running stroll with her? I'm like, exactly, you got that. Then she was actually a yoga teacher. I mean, she still is. So she wanted to teach yoga. And then she had dreams of opening up her studio and putting on so much pressure, and she couldn't just leave her job. I'm like, what is it that you could do? So you're still getting the joy. So we explored what was the reason behind opening up her studio, or basically I'm like, is it the brand? Do you want to build a brand? Do you want a name? She's like, no, I just want to be in a room full of people where I can see, because as she was getting a certification, she taught yoga to a couple of her neighbors, and they said, oh, my neck feels better. It was all about impact. I
Mm.
said, what could you do? She said, I could teach yoga for someone else
Mm.
as I'm building my name and as I get to that point. So who's to say that the societal have it all is the answer to your have it all? So it's about deciding what is your definition of having it all. And she did that, and I'm happy to report that she has her own yoga studio now. Took her 5 years. But now her kids are teenagers, and she's like, this is a perfect time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And it's ironic that we're talking about yoga teaching and this is
Yeah.
part of the story. Yeah, I do find when I work with people, sometimes they have this sort of very rigid way of thinking. And I love that what you shared was, it sounds like part of your role in working with her was to sort of help her shift from thinking it has to be all or nothing to thinking about other ways that are more flexible ways to get where she wants to go.
So
That,
she had it all at every stage, but the
yeah,
definition was hers.
yeah, the definition was hers.
Because we forget, we just focus on the end result, but it's the process. The process, the more you're focused on process, then you can have it all. So, for example, you're going to, let's say, Alaska, okay? So you may have a couple of layovers. And now you're in the plane, you're complaining, oh, there's a delay. And versus you make it an adventure. That, oh, you know what? Let me book flights through some new airports that I've never been to.
Mm.
Maybe let me make a layover of 4 hours where I can get out of the airport, go just check out a few things. I mean, I'm not saying you gotta do that.
Right.
Just kind of having, and then making all that process as a joy. And that kind of brings us back to mindfulness, that the moment that you have is not a means to an end.
Mm.
It's an end in itself.
Mm.
Moment is that part of your life that will never come back. So you're not getting somewhere. You are there already. So if you're there already and if you're in it, then the whole experience becomes a joyous one rather than that rush to get somewhere.
Yeah, this is definitely something, I mean, I can sort of reframe it for yoga teachers that are listening because a lot of the messaging in the yoga industry is that it takes a long time to be a really good yoga teacher. And you could replace that with anything. It takes a really good time to be really good at anything, right? It takes a
Yeah.
time to learn anything, or a really long time to learn anything. And in what you're saying, it's almost as if you're saying, instead of focusing on that message and that perception that it's going to take me X number of years to be a really good yoga teacher, however I define that, what about shifting what I'm looking at and reframing it so I'm looking at what I'm doing right now as part of the progress I'm making and not focusing so much on that end goal? Is that part of what?
Yeah. And think about it, right? Like, let's say, even if it is you're just 3 days into yoga,
Mm.
Compare yourself 3 days back. You didn't even know that. So that moment is so precious.
Yeah.
And as a yoga teacher, like, mindfulness is something like as you're focusing on breathing, and I say that the more mindfulness yoga teachers will practice themselves, the more finesse and the more beauty will show up in your yoga itself.
Mm. Yeah, very true. Um,
Not
one,
that I am a yoga teacher or, I mean, I know some poses, but because of some physical restrictions, I'm not able to do it. But
mhm.
the key is like, think about it. Like, whenever you see a yoga teacher in the flow, right? When they're in the moment, it's like poetry, it's artistry.
Yes. Yeah, and part of what you said when we were talking before about flipping the lens from yourself to the other person or the class as a way to sort of decrease your nerves and stress and put the focus on impact. I love that idea again because every single teacher that I talk to, when I ask them, why are you teaching yoga? They'll say, it made such an impact on me that I want to share it with other people. And obviously, situations are different at the detail level, but just generally, it's that
Mhm.
it was so impactful to me, my mental health, my body, my mind body connection, that I want to be the conduit through which other people experience that. And so even just shifting to, like when you had said before, why are you even doing this? Or no one's pressuring you to do it. If you want to have it all, and that involves working and having a family and teaching yoga, the teaching yoga part presumably came up because you wanted to do it. It's not like anybody forcing you to do it. But isn't it
Right.
interesting when we sort of get ourselves to that point and all of a sudden we're kind of complaining that we don't have any time?
Yeah. And going back to my client's story, she would come and say, like, I go there so hassle. Like sometimes I feel I'm just doing the motions.
Hmm.
I'm like, what if you could
Yeah,
create that space where everybody's coming like that?
right,
And you could create this space where they could just let go and be with you.
right.
And that stuck with her. And she
Yeah.
started doing that. And her classes would be just booked. Like, people wanted to just join because she was not just showing the framework, but she was bringing that experience herself and her energy. So there's so much to be said about that it cannot be described. It has to be experienced.
Yeah. And what a beautiful kind of place she's in now where her kids are older and she has a studio. And looking back, it must be unbelievable to look back and think when she was,
Yeah, she couldn't even imagine. She wanted it all
yeah,
and forgetting that there's a journey to it. You
right.
just can't. And the problem is like, and I put a lot of well, some people may not like it, but if you look at the social media and the movies, right? So if you look at the movies, well, how do they show? Oh yeah, like, this fantastic, like the women are fighting. And guess what? At the end of the movie, I forget which one was it. I think it was the Rangers, forget the star's name too. It's been a while. And she was wearing this whole white jacket, very pretty actress. Not even a spot on her white outfit after fighting in the dirt and all these Transformers and all that. I think it was one of the Transformer movies.
Yeah,
So the movies and social media, like think about it. What are people doing? They're putting the best foot forward. Is that reality? It's not.
right.
I mean, social media has really done a number on human beings.
Yeah, yeah,
The
for sure.
whole thing about fear of missing out and comparing yourself. Oh my God, she looks so beautiful. Who knows? She might have put 10 different filters.
Yeah, yeah. This actually brings up a question about comparison. We can talk about it generally, just that natural feeling of comparing ourselves to other people. And certainly social media is a place where that's happening all the time, consciously or unconsciously, as we're scrolling through. One thing, though, that is a recurrent challenge for teachers that I talk to is once they begin teaching, when they go to take other people's classes, they're triggered by what the other person is teaching or how that other person is carrying themselves as they walk around the room or the types of cues that they're using or the sequence that they're teaching. And for a lot of teachers, that I talk to, they get to this place where it's stressful to go take yoga. So here they're doing a good thing for themselves by going to take a class, but now they're in class and they tend to be in their head thinking, well, maybe I should be doing that sort of transition in my class, or wow, that person's using cues that sound so interesting. How come I'm not doing that? So now you're taking something that's supposed to be good for you and you're turning it into something that becomes this trigger to feeling badly. So again, this is a niche example, but it brings up, the larger example of just comparing ourselves to other people. What are some of the things that you would suggest for somebody that's experiencing that?
Great question. And people experience that regardless wherever they are in their lives, because human beings are designed for social approval. We look for that. And we look for approval from our parents, and that's why, like, my post got 500 likes. Influencers, everything about the numbers. They've got 1 million followers. They've got so many views. They've got 100 hours of this. So what happens is that, again, recognizing and becoming self-aware that our brains have been conditioned to look for social approval. Okay, so when you're looking for social approval, as you become self-aware, is taking that pause. What's one thing? And reframing it, and it's going to take time. What's one thing I could take that I could put it in my class? Just one, not multiple, not 10. Or if you're ambitious, write down 3 things. Take a notebook with you. So rather than, oh, I'm not doing this, just see what feels truly aligned to you.
Mm,
Being true to yourself. And we talk about alignment. If a car is out of alignment, it goes zigzag, zigzag. So human beings are no different.
mm,
Whenever you feel out of alignment, just kind of think, okay, what will really be a good addition, not replacement. I'm not going to say replacement in the
mm,
initial stages. Of course, later down the road, you can do that for the initial. What could I add? 3 things. I'd
mm,
say start out with one. And if you're ambitious, go up to 3. And if you are even more ambitious, go up to 5, but no more than that.
mhm,
Take a notebook, just write it down, make notes. So now you're not like letting it fester in your head. Oh, I should
mm,
be doing this. I should be. So instead of I should, you're like, what could I add?
mm,
And one thing I'll say is that the more and more you work on yourself, you'll find the ability to let go of these limiting beliefs and barriers to being joyous. So I will share an example. Like I do live workshops all the time. So I was there. I had been in a rush in the morning. So I go there and one of my attendees says, she's just pointing at me. I'm like, so I said, just speak up. She's like, so she took me out and says, you're wearing your shirt inside out. And I had walked through the lobby saying hello to everyone. I smile. And for a second, my inner critic showed up. Oh, how could you do that? I'm like, so what? What's the big deal? What's the difference? Tag is showing on my back. So putting it into perspective, inner
Yeah.
critic will show up, acknowledge it, thank you, and then put it into perspective. I'm like, thank you for sharing with me. And then, of course, I went and changed it out. But I have actually done that. I wear my t-shirts inside out on purpose. I go for a walk, I go to grocery store, and it'll be very interesting. People will look and pss, 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 they'll whisper. But I've only had 2 people out of 10 occasions tell me, did
Mm,
you know you were wearing your shirt inside out? I'm like, thank you so much for telling me. I really appreciate it.
mm,
So I do social experiments all the time.
yeah.
And that's the key. Like, think about it in a way, giving yourself the permission. The more permission you give yourself, the happier you become.
Mm,
And sometimes we have to work on it.
mm,
Sometimes we have to continue working on it. Sometimes you'll be working on it for a long time and everything's okay. There's no right or wrong.
mm. Is there something about, and I can also say I've worn my yoga pants inside out and realized when I've come home that the tag in the back was sticking out and nobody said anything to me. And I didn't know this until I came home and I realized, oh, I was wearing my pants inside out. Why do you think that people or the brain or both tend to make things like you're describing a much bigger deal than they really are in reality? What is it about the way we're wired that makes us think? Because it's exactly what you said, it's not a big deal, but yet there's so many different examples we could share.
Mm-hmm.
We, as the person experiencing it, has raised the bar to such a heightened level when in reality that's not really where the bar is, if there's a bar at all.
Societal norms. It's again the definition of success. You
Mm,
got to define your own definition of success. So think about it. When you're on the beach, if you think about it, people are in their underwear, bikini, right? I mean, so yes, but that is acceptable. Now think about it. If somebody, a lady was walking down in a bikini, same thing, okay, not even her underwear, down the street, people will be like,
right.
so it is all these social, which are important. Because
Yeah.
think about it, if we did not have these social norms, then the society would be very chaotic and people, because people don't have the capacity, if there are no frameworks or structure, they don't know what to do with their independence. So they're necessary. It's very, very important because they're defined. Like, human beings like structure. That, okay, if I'm going to a good restaurant, I need to have shoes. Or if I'm going to a country club, I need to be wearing polo. So those are important for people to follow and have a good life. But at the same token, as long as you don't let it become the chains around your feet and hand and around your neck that holds you back, I
Mm,
say they're very good. Like same thing like for I say that like having speed limits so important. Otherwise, somebody would be going at 100 miles per hour. So those expectations are necessary.
mhm.
But now if you let them stop you and make a big deal about it, so that's where you got to differentiate. It
Right,
happened, fine.
right. I mean, it almost sounds like when you were flipping from should and could, it almost sounds like in this example, you're sort of giving yourself grace to just be.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and I'll give an example. Several years back, one of my cousin's son graduated, so I had gone there. Parents had spent like almost, I don't know, $150 per head. Okay, they're wearing some great clothes, all these youngsters. Probably, I don't know, maybe it was in 2000. I don't remember the time. And they were all wearing flip-flops because that was the fashion. So that was acceptable.
Yeah.
But all the adults who had not experienced that, they're looking at these youngsters, but those youngsters didn't have a care. They were just fine. So it's about also like, you want to challenge and yet know the thing like, is it necessary to challenge or do you just want to ruffle some feathers? So
Right.
it's that's where the emotional intelligence kind of comes in, knowing and finding that harmony. I say there is no balance. I
Mm,
always say that there is that harmony.
mm,
Harmony in the sense that as long as you're true to yourself while not putting anybody else down, because that's another thing that has happened in our society. Self-expression, yes, it's important, but not at the cost of others. You want
mm,
to be like, oh, I want to be like this. And in the process, I'll tear somebody else down. I'll blame other people. That's not right.
yeah. Hmm. So one connection I'd love to make, as we're sort of wrapping up here, I'd love to kind of make a connection because I've not talked about emotional intelligence on my podcast before, but it's such an interesting concept, and I'd love for you to help me make the connection between emotional intelligence and confidence. Like, what's the bridge? Like, how are we building up our emotional intelligence so that we can feel more confident? What's the connection? Because I almost think of emotional intelligence and confidence as different neural states, but maybe they have sort of an overlap. So, what do
They
you?
do. So when you're building your capacity and capabilities and competencies, so kind of demonstrate it with one of my examples of my clients. So one of my other clients, she wanted to stay in the corporate. She wanted to climb the ladder. She was in finance world, so mostly men.
Mm,
And everybody, they would talk about sports, and it was just a different talk. And then she felt out of place. So I asked her, okay, where do you feel true to yourself? She's like, it sounds so much fun. I've sat down with them and watched, like, for a couple of outings, right? Happy hour. I've watched football game and I've gotten into it, but I don't feel true to myself. I'm like, why? She's like, why should I have to learn football? I'm like, so there's your again belief or the conditioning that to be true to myself, I don't have to know football. But now, because you adapted, you found that you enjoy football. So what's wrong with that?
mm,
Football is not just for guys, or football or softball is not just for girls. So I'm like, use your emotional intelligence here, make the connection. She said, huh. She had a breakthrough moment and said that, yeah, it would be okay for me to enjoy football. I'm not, by doing that, I'm not being not true to myself or stepping out of alignment.
mm,
She started enjoying that and she loved hanging out with them. So this was the piece of emotional intelligence where I say that, like, you are discerning
mm,
the situation and connecting the dots at a finer level, not
mm,
just at the superficial level,
mm,
because she could have said, like, oh, I'm not being true to myself, I'm going to change the whole industry. So her whole life could have been miserable just for that. And that's how she came, like blaming, oh, it's all boys thing. I'm like, listen, women have entered, and now we have come to a point where guys are not going to college. They did a whole study, and now men are falling behind. We have
mm.
done women, women, women,
Yeah.
which is awesome because women had been suppressed for so many centuries. But again, we have to find that harmony.
Mm,
So she saw with her emotional intelligence that it was okay. I said, it's not us versus them. It's
mm,
not women versus men. It's not this race versus that, or it's not like, this versus them. It's about just kind of creating that beautiful harmony. People are people, no matter what the race, what the color, what the country,
mm,
what gender, whatever you identify with, doesn't matter. We, at the core of our heart, everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to live a fulfilling life. Everybody wants to have that meaning and significance. Everyone wants to have that peace which is common to all of us.
that's lovely. Yeah, I mean, as you're describing it, I almost think of it as like elevated thinking. Like instead of the conditional thinking, it's almost like upgrading the way you think and see the world and see yourself. It's this more elevated opportunity to experience life. So that is just
Absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it. And think about it. Like here she was like, I don't fit in.
right.
Versus to she went and I don't fit in and I am not being true to myself. Versus I found something new to enjoy
Mhm.
and I fit in. So what did that emotional intelligence do? Gave her the confidence.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to connect it. Amazing. So I know that you've written a number of books. I did and then a review of the books that you've written. So a lot of different topics, triumph over trauma, thriving beyond crisis. So I know that for the listener, there's quite a bit of diving in they can do with your books. Share for the listener how they can find you, how they can find your books, and anything else that you would like to share so that people can stay in touch with you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Karen, for having me on your show. I really appreciate that and your time and the work that you're doing for others. So what I would say is if you are like, if you are a yoga teacher and if you are looking to kind of get out of there, so the two books that will really help you, one is The Entrepreneur's Garden, and several of my readers have actually said that they've increased 33% of their business just by reading the book. They've created mastermind around it. And the second one is The Expert to Influencer. So those two books will not only help you with your business, but with the imposter syndrome and the confidence that we have talked about. And everything is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like, the places where books are available. And where can you find me? You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn, and my website, it's divyaparekh.com. So if you kind of like Google me up, I'm easy person to find.
Okay. Fabulous. Well, thank you so, so much. This has been a lot of fun and I learned a lot. I feel like my brain got a nice dose of just learning and the wheels are turning. So, yeah, I really feel like it is again higher level humanness and also we did it. I think there were just so many things that you were able to kind of make it relevant for a yoga teacher, which is a large part of my listening community. So I thank you for that. And I look forward to hearing this. I'm going to post this on at the end of the month on June 30th. So we'll get it out there and we'll share it and I'll send you the link. And thank you again so much.
Thank you.